And we're live.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the end user feedback meeting. Today, we're going to be focusing a little bit on the enterprise use cases. There are a few folks here who are deeply in the enterprise world. So perhaps we can just kick it off by a quick intro from everybody, and then we can talk about the agenda and some of the topics we would like to go through. So I'll start. My name is Ahmed Nasri. I'm the principal architect at TELUS. TELUS is a telecom company in Canada, and we're heavily invested in the Node.js ecosystem, and we're looking for ways of how we can provide some feedback and or value back to the ecosystem in any shape or form, given our deep investment in it and our dependency on it. Joel, you want to go next?
Yeah. My name is Joe Chen. I'm the principal architect of customer engineering web platform at Walmart Labs. So Walmart and Walmart Labs has been a long time user of Node.js because Walmart is such a big company. We have many teams who use Node.js. We have teams that we don't even know about that has been using Node.js for something. And in the past 3 years, we actually migrate the Walmart.com website to Node.js, and we've been heavily invested in migrating more and more things to Node.js. As of now, we are migrating Azure and upgrading to Kubernetes and Dockers, and we are constantly looking for ways to be able to enhance our how we use Node.js and our visibility into our applications that are depending on Node.js.
Cool. I'm just going to go by the names in the Zoom meeting. Mihai, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, my name is Mihai Nepietrușanu. I'm a project manager acting in Portland area with PMI Institute and Romanian American Society. And right now I'm a user feedback member. Thank you.
Cool. Adrian, you want to go next?
Yep. Hello. My name is Adrian. My current role, I work, or I should say, I co-lead a thought leadership group at CGI, and my focus is on software development, developer experience, and architecture. Thanks for the invite, Ahmed. I'm here. I'm interested in chatting about how the Node ecosystem is growing, especially in financial services, insurance companies, and things like that, and how we can improve that kind of experience in more complex organizations.
Cool. Dan, you want to give a quick intro?
I'll try to be brief. Love the emphasis on quick. Dan Shaw, I created the Node.js user feedback initiative, and I champion this initiative to the community committee of Node.js project. I am long time enterprise sort of connective tissue. Started 2 startups, the Node firm and Node Source, that are dedicated to kind of serving that intersection between Node.js and the enterprise.
Cool. So in terms of the agenda here, like we want to do a quick. We've done a quick kind of introductions. We all are using Node.js. I think there's an important context that every time people talk about using Node.js and their workplaces, the context of what do you use it for and how is it actually impacting your business and to what level of importance is it for your business? And the reason that question is important, the Node Foundation and folks who are working on core Node.js and the ecosystem around it with all the modules and the libraries and tools that we use don't often get to see or learn how deep their contributions, or more importantly, their decisions are on big enterprise businesses. So this is hopefully the start of an open dialogue that can help feed some of those conversations in both ways, so that when big companies, let's say like ours, are rolling into new versions of Node and seeing perhaps issues or improvements or values being created from certain features or certain investment in features that yields multi-million-dollar kind of business, but more importantly is serving millions of users. it's that context has been missing, and hopefully we can surface that. So like, I'm just going to piggyback off what Joel said. We also did a recent update to our website where we went entirely in Node.js in the past couple of years. And that's, we're a telco in Canada. We're serving millions and millions of customers. And it's very core and integral to our business, the health of the ecosystem and the health of our applications. And since they're entirely Node.js based, having that connection to the community and having that value conversation surface is very important. So just to structure the conversation a little bit better, I want to understand a little bit more from everybody, like, what does it actually mean that you're using Node.js? Again, like Joel said, your website is on Node.js, but what does that actually mean? What are you actually using? What is the ecosystem for your development tooling look like? And is it mostly JavaScript with Node.js as an accelerator for tooling, or is it you're relying on Node.js itself for running your backends and your APIs and your systems? Joel, you want to?
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Go ahead.
So, but before Node.js, Walmart Lab is a very heavy Java user. And as of today, we are still very heavy JVM user. I mean, not strictly the Java language itself. For example, we have teams who are using Clojure. And we also have teams who are using Golang for like high traffic routing and data routing applications. On the front end of the website itself, we were using Java and Spring Webflow in Java, and a bunch of different JavaScript framework like Backbone and jQuery. So when we moved to Node.js, we were primarily thinking of using Node.js to power a React web application. So, and that means that Node.js has replaced all of the web front end and powering React to run the website, and in the back end as an orchestration layer to connect to all the back end. So the back end is still based on Java. Mm-hmm. And a lot of our tooling existed as Java framework. Like we use Nexus, we use Jenkins for build, and we are building new tools in Java that complementing the existing Nexus and the Jenkins ecosystem. For example, we actually have teams who built an NPM server on top of Nexus, and we have teams who build a build system on top of Jenkins. So Node.js now is mainly used as an orchestration for the web applications.
So middleware for the most part.
Yes.
Okay. And how reliant are you on that middleware in terms of your business operations? Like, just to quantify that a little bit more, what's the opportunity cost for you to even consider trying something other than Node.js? Is that something that you're heavily invested in terms of that middleware technology being reliant on Node.js, given the front end dependency, or is that just a investment that you're doing now, but you don't have a dependency on?
I would say we are deeply integrated with Node.js as far as running our website. I mean, we're within the first year of deciding to convert to Node.js, we convert almost every team. We have a few hundred developers who are working on the e-commerce site itself. And within the first year, we convert all the apps. Like we have a couple of major apps. Like we have the homepage. When you hit Walmart.com, that's a homepage, and then with search, we have a item page, category, and basically everything that has to do with Walmart.com. We've converted our team to Node.js in the front end orchestration and the middleware layer.
So given that journey that you went through, and I'm going to start asking other folks as well, same questions, but given that journey you went through, what would you have said the biggest kind of contributing factors for you to be successful in that? And also, what have been the biggest hindering factors for your success and that you had to overcome? And how did, like in specific terms, if you have the ability to talk directly to the Node community and the people building the libraries and the tools that you're using to affect their decisions or influence their decisions, what would those two factors be for success and challenges?
I think the first biggest factor is sort of also a benefit and also a disadvantage, actually. We initially went with Node.js from Java because we thought, obviously we want to have a unified technology, because before our developer had to do JavaScript and Java. So we thought that, okay, everything is JavaScript. So now our developers can focus on one thing. And that definitely has its advantage, because we were able to get our more developers to work on a wider area of things. But at the same time, because we're moving to a Node.js, and obviously Node.js is more than JavaScript, underneath, and Node.js, the way Node.js work, the asynchronous nature is very, very new to a lot of our developers. And so training has been our biggest thing. And today we continue to invest heavily in training and to help our developers to learn how Node.js work and get up to speed on the entire ecosystem.
Is there any direct relation to the documentation on Node.js or the kind of helpful guides that exist today from the community that you would have benefited more from, or you were seeing lacking in that context?
Me personally, I mean, obviously, I don't find documentation lacking. And of course, I dig into the code more frequent than I actually look at the documentation. But for a lot of our developers, some of our developers who are, I guess, who need a little bit more hand-holding than just kind of go and dig into the code and figure out everything on their own.
Yeah,
I would say that documentation, it's kind of fragmented as far as the documentation goes. I always go to the Node.js, the course documentation directly to look up anything about Node.js. But as you know, those are kind of white page reference. So you really have to read between the line to figure out what's going on. And and a lot of our developers, a typical task for them, and they just want to find out, okay, how do you do this thing? What is there any examples? That's one of the questions I get asked the most. Hey, I want to achieve this task, and I am not sure how I do it, but do you have any examples? So I think as far as documentation goes, the example is probably far more important for most of our developers.
Yeah, I think the key takeaway there is that the documentation today, at least on the core side of things, is very reference oriented as opposed to guides and example oriented. That's a good kind of takeaway. Adrian, I want to switch to you quickly in the same kind of context of the questions. Like, what sort of workloads are you using Node.js for, and what has been your success factors and challenges in getting your teams to adopt and use?
So Node.js is picking up a lot in that backend as a front end kind of style with a lot of the clients and the teams that I'm working on. And the reason, again, the companies I work with are heavy into the Java ecosystem. They have existing, large applications built in Java that they want to interface with or do something quickly with. So building these back as a front end and their channels layer to do specific things to expose specific APIs internally or externally, Node has been almost 100% the choice to do that. Yeah, so I mean, challenges. There are specific challenges I like to talk about around dealing with the complexities, maybe in the sharing of certain code bases, libraries, things like that. If you could think about it as like where you have several independent organizations within these larger organizations, each developing libraries or things like that, standards even, that they want to distribute across the broader organization. They do that with NPM registries. They'll self-host it on their own Artifactory Nexus repository. And then the consumer of those libraries or API libraries that are being developed as standards are consumed, in your regular package JSON file. The problem is when you have multiple repositories, you need to set up an npm-rc type thing and name your specific repositories, and then explicitly call the libraries by name in your package JSON file. That creates a lot of headache when we try to do things like create more of a standard way of delivering software through, let's say, DevOps pipelines, Jenkins pipelines. Configurations in those environments become very complex when you have to deal with several types of RC files that are specific to specific teams. Where, and again, to deliver specific software in these types of organizations, they may have access to their dev environments, but they may not have access to their later environments downstream. And so standard pipelines are built, and to have so many configurations to deal with those individual snowflakes, right? It's a lot for that part of the organization to deal with. And there's optimizations, obviously, you can make with process and things like that. But this is the way it is right now. And so if you take Maven as an example of the tool lifecycles and multiple repositories, and having the tool actually be able to query multiple registries, that kind of experience, I think, would be like much better for these types of organizations. Yeah, I think
a quick annotation to that I should probably ask before as well for Joel and everybody else is, like, how big is the team you're talking about, and how many applications are you managing?
So team size can range from like 2 to like a dozen, but application portfolios, you're looking at like 2,000. And then then there's an exponential growth there when you talk about libraries that are being published internally, right?
Those are individually maintained applications, not libraries per se.
Yeah, so applications themselves, you're looking at like a couple thousand. Libraries and everything else, you're looking in the 3, 4, 5 times that amount.
Wow. Just for context, my team right now is about 450 humans. Out of those, at least 1/3 are developers. Mm-hmm. The rest are between QA, design, and kind of project and business leadership teams. So over 150 to 200 people are directly working on code bases. And as for application counts, we have, I think, 800 individual applications and about 100 or so libraries that we've created and maintained internally. Joel, what's your kind of stats look like for that context? You're on mute, Joel.
Sorry. So just for Walmart.com itself, we have, I don't have exact number, but just for Walmart.com itself, we have probably about 300 developers. It's just so-called web developers, and that doesn't include all the other supporting teams. And for teams, we have about 10, 12 teams. Each team is between 10 to 15 developers, give or take. So that is our primary stat for the Walmart.com. But as a global org, Walmart has probably, I don't know, hundreds of teams around who are continuously migrating to Node.js.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Like that was my direct team that I mentioned, but our community of practice, as we refer to it, all the developers across the organization is over 2,000 people, actual developers. So this is why that's important in the context of what you mentioned of onboarding and training and knowledge management, and what Adrian is mentioning in terms of complexity of sharing code and managing access to code and consistency in development, in delivery, that becomes a factor of a 10 to 1,000, it seems, of complexity when you have these amount of teams. So anybody else on the call has any additional context to add here? I saw some people join, but it seems that they also disconnected. Maybe not. I think
Nikolai said he had to drop, unfortunately. So we'll have to catch him another time.
So I think the relevant next question to ask in that context is, just to use their recent examples, any recent releases or changes or updates to APIs in the core of Node that have directly impacted your team or are directly in your line of sight. Like, for example, we have a new security patch release just today, I think, or yesterday. Do you look at those every day? Are those impactful to your velocity of delivery? Do you just rely on CI/CD tools to just keep those up to date for you? How do you keep track of all the changes in the core? And do you even invest time personally to look at it, or as a team to look at it? Adrian, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, things move pretty slow in financial services and insurance companies, and there are specific parts of the organization that look after that. Now we could talk about things like containers and PaaS, Kubernetes, to kind of solve these issues and shift those responsibilities a bit left to the development teams. We're not there yet, so it is slow moving. So being able to upgrade and get the latest patches and things like that, it is a bit of a process. I don't have suggestions on how that can be improved with dealing with thousands of VMs that have to be taken down and redeployed one by one.
So who in your organization is responsible for the security aspect of things, given that there are security patches and announcements being made around that?
Yep.
Are they actively looking at that? Are they participating in any sort of feedback cycle on those?
So the way it would typically work is you have the security part of the organization, or the risk side, monitoring those type of releases and changes, and giving, or even an audit, right? Let's say an external auditor comes in and says you got to upgrade. That's another event that could trigger something, and then there's typically a plan, a rollout to make the upgrades across the organization. So then that could take a quarter, that could take 2 quarters. It depends on the size of the organization. But there's one other thing I wanted to actually add. So to even get like proxies to the public NPM registries, there's a big process around that to get your whitelisted, right? Get whitelisted on that. But I think one thing that might, and part of the reason is because the way you authenticate on the public registry is, password, basic auth type setup, where if you use the PGP setup, then the publisher, you can guarantee the publisher is the one that makes a change, so that when there is a change, the process of allowing that specific new version to be available through the proxy a lot quicker. The vetting process is essentially shorter.
And Joel, do you have any context in terms of to what degree are you investing in or looking at what changes are happening in the release cycles of Node and the kind of, let's say, the libraries and the ecosystem around it? Like, do you actively look at those? Are you actively looking for security patches and updates? Do you review every changes to API features or changes in the APIs themselves?
Yeah, we have many people who are passively and actively kind of monitoring the changes in the core. And for our practice, we actually lock to a version, and we don't update that version unless there's something that's major. Like we do an update every 6 months, and then if there's any security or big release, then we would consider upgrading. Otherwise, we lock to a version for about 6 month period. And like I said, we have developers who are constantly monitoring. And I mean, on our internal Slack, we have a Node.js channel, and every time there's something going on, someone would just post something. So, and I personally monitor the activity in the core myself to see what's going on and bring that back to our teams.
So it sounds like, and I would echo the same thing for our organization. A lot of the interactivity is very reactive. You know, we hear about something on Twitter or we see it in an announcement, and then either we're like, okay, we can upgrade, or it's changed to an API or a core feature, and we're like, okay, we don't use that, or we use that, might or might not affect us. Is there an opportunity for that to become a feedback cycle or a feedback loop? Like, at what point are you able to invest something back to the community by either testing those things ahead of time, perhaps, or aside from an individual level, which I know we all do out of passion, but like as an organization, how do we drive that feedback cycle or investment back into the ecosystem? And just to give a couple of solid examples, when there's LTS and there's release management and all of that, but there's no reason that we as development teams can't go and put all of our development environments or staging environments on Node 10 and start testing it, make sure all of our apps are working. And if any issues come up core related, we can then, provide a direct feedback to the core teams. Now, the question of how do you systematically do that, but I think there's an opportunity there to explore. Likewise, if we look at our, like Adrian was talking about in terms of dependency management and release management, all of that, like when you look at stats on NPM and you look at numbers, those are devoid of any or void of any sort of business value or consumer value. You can see how many downloads a certain package has, but it doesn't tell you that it's operating on, let's say, Walmart's backends, and it's a critical path of the delivery for Walmart or TELUS or any other financial system. So how do we effectively are able to surface those things so that the investment in either the core or the packages around the ecosystem are, at least given more attention, if not potentially more funding even?
So we do have a lot of our teams who are kind of unofficially constantly trying out whenever there's a new major version. We don't go for the minor or patch version unless there's a big improvement. But whenever a new major version comes out, plenty of our developers and teams are already trying out and running their apps on staging and dev environment to test. So this is where I would say that so far everything that's coming out from no core is actually pretty good, because we started with version 4, and when we migrated 6, 8, and 10, every time, even just the first release of each major, we were able to migrate to it fairly easily, like without any issue. I mean, we just, like, for 6, 8, we just kind of changed the version and boom, everything just works. And obviously, we dig deeper a little bit into it, we find small issues that we just fix. So, and if we find any big things, we do go to the core and maybe file issue or ask about it, or we will go around and look for activities. And more often than not, any small issue we found, we would find that the entire internet, people who use Node.js, they would already have the same issue, and there would already be a issue file, or people have been talking about it already. But yes, definitely, if we can have a more systematic feedback loop on that, we can definitely help out on contributing back our testings on new versions.
So I have a question there. It sounds like seamless and smooth upgrades between versions is a kind of a key value for you. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Cool. Ahmad, would you as well?
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. What about you, Adrian?
Yeah, for sure. When you're dealing with so many environments to upgrade, that's having a seamless experience definitely speeds things up.
Cool. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we captured that because I think that's an interesting thing that we've discussed in the past. It's been a key value for a long time, but I like hearing the reinforcement of that. It's useful.
Yeah.
Cool.
So to the point of making something systematic, I would imagine it's going to be A, complex, and B, costly to say, Adrian, hey, how about you go and test the latest version of Node 10 on all of your application and perhaps run some diagnostic and send it back to anonymous data, hopefully, nothing business critical, send some feedback back to, let's say, the Node core, perhaps on things like performance. Does upgrading from 10.1 to 10.2 improve or decrease performance in any significant way to your business? Do you see any sort of regression issues that weren't captured or weren't addressed in the kind of public forum? Is that something you're able to do at all? Is there a cost constraints to that? Given that perhaps there's some form of systematic way to do that and some form of way, and maybe this is the group to kind of surface how to do that. But let's say those things exist. Are you able to do it?
Yeah. So I don't think there's if there was a systematic way to do that, I think definitely the organizations I work with would take advantage of that. I mean, the more data, the better. And being able to report that back to the broader community would definitely be of value, especially those that are moving quicker than the others, for the the laggers or the fast followers, to be able to to get that information and apply it, and and kind of de-risk their upgrades. For sure, yeah. And I think, yeah.
You don't foresee any cost issues with that? Like, do you have to justify that for the business in any way?
I think as these organizations move more towards automating a lot of their testing environments, or just testing or application delivery process in general, those concerns tend to go away. Mm-hmm. And then when you're able to create ephemeral environments on the fly to do some upgrade tests, just some quick regressions, again, those problems go away. I think for sure in the current process, there will be added costs, chargebacks from, the QA performance team or something like that back to the team. No one wants to take that out of the budget. So
I can give you an example in our world for today. Like, if I am to go and let's say I want to test the most recent version of Node for, let's say, performance and any sort of regressions, I cannot do that without fundamentally changing how my pipelines are built, so that I can still do my regular pipelines and I can run this in parallel somewhere else, because all of my version locking is happening in Docker files. Mm-hmm. I have to figure out a way to systematically change that, either on the runtime of the pipeline or by forking every single repo and having a different version lock in it. But I would love to be able to do it, and I don't think the business, at least in my case, cost wouldn't be an issue for doing that. It will be a blip on the radar, other than the human cost of somebody going in and doing that work.
So I'd actually like to echo that a bit, and this is with my node source kind of hat on, having worked with a company that does support for large enterprises. I think that, there's a few different categories of enterprises that are using Node. There's the ones who are like kind of bleeding edge and have this kind of mandate from the top to act like a startup. I've heard that multiple times. So, there's those ones that I think kind of fall in line with what we're discussing here. And then there's other ones that are much more laggards, I guess is a good way to put it. I would also echo that they don't necessarily have the cost concern, but it's more of an expertise concern in terms of, okay, like, do we want to do this, or even being aware of it? Does this exist? Is this something we would get? What is the benefit of doing this for us? And so I think that even defining that use case of like what enterprises would be the target for this kind of thing would be useful.
I think for us is that it's a little more complex than any single thing. So for our management, to them, they're always about value add, like what value does doing this brings. And if you want official investment into something, that's the question they always ask. But our teams generally runs fairly autonomously, so each team have their own internal process. And up to this point, all the testing we've been done is just basically each team has that, like a lead developer, or has that geek developer who's always out there playing with things, and those are the ones who will be the one who just go out and try a new Node version because they just want to. And we do have, obviously for us to contribute the computing resource to do all this testing, that would not be an issue. That come from a bigger pool, and we have like tens of thousands of those. That's generally not an issue. And to make this into an official thing would mean that it will be visible on the radar, and the management could possibly ask about it. And once we make this an official, it means it's something that each team will have to stick to, and it may, whenever they have a pressure on delivering the feature, their primary feature, then they would obviously look for things that they want to put in the back. So these kind of things would be the things that they probably like, okay, we can skip that for this sprint or something.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'm just trying to come up with ideas of how we can create that feedback loop, right? So, doesn't necessarily mean there's one way to do it, or perhaps there's more than one way to do it. And it will, like Tierney said, like there are probably different types of organizations that have different work modes and different kind of, let's say, motivations to have that feedback loop. So, what other means are there that perhaps you, Joel, or Adrian see in terms of what information can you provide back that can help, and whether that information can be, and I'm talking about systematic information. I'm not talking about, individual information, because I know Joel is passionate. I know Adrian's passionate. I'm passionate. We all spend our time in kind of driving value in the ecosystem. But what methods do you see are feasible for your organization that can, drive a bigger contribution, if you will, from your ecosystem of, 1,000+ developers, or my ecosystem of 2,000+ developers, to effectively have some feedback cycle? And just to throw some examples out there, like, do you track your Node version history and your performance characteristics of your servers? And do you historically look back at those and say, oh, we've improved or not improved? Do you look at the amount of error rates you've been getting on, sure, versions of your code, but also versions of what you're running under your code, libraries, the tooling, and so on? Is there any way to anonymize that data and perhaps publish it somewhere, or feed it back to a trusted organization or group part of the Node ecosystem, so that can help them do something better about it? Or like we said, is there a way for an organization to take bleeding edge and run it and try to do some feedback cycles around that? Just like ideation here on the fly. I don't know if any of those things are technically feasible, but, well, I know they're technically feasible. I don't know if they're business feasible.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Joel or Adrian.
Yeah. I think you touched on a couple key things. One, anonymizing the data. A lot of these organizations are very regulated, and not to say that performance data is sensitive data at all, but there's an investment on their side, at least, to be able to expose that data. And so an incentive for them to do that, I don't know what that would be and how they would do that, be able to do that. But in the reverse direction, leading back to your previous question about, Joel said it best, the magic word value add. If you could show that, doing this kind of systematic testing earlier on can essentially save you a lot of money down the line before you get out to production, where you actually got full production workloads. and then you're seeing performance degradation out there. At least that might be a good enough incentive for them to invest in it and then to get it back out. I don't know.
That's a good point. What can the Node core team or the libraries and ecosystem out there do to feed you information that can help you accelerate your development paths and your investment? So a key example there, that exactly what we just mentioned, but in reverse, like you said, Adrian, if along with every version of Node, there's a clear kind of business case for, let's say, performance improvements that is measured and published in a way that can be consumed by the business leaders, that you can then take and put that in a presentation or a slide deck or a business case of some sort, and say, look, we need to update here. This is not just about being on the latest and greatest. There's an actual economical value to the business of saving cost, creating more transactions, because in the financial ecosystem, that's really the metric, or whatever other kind of value add that you can measure there.
Yeah. So maybe this is a bit biased, but a lot of the consultancies are here working directly with the leaders here who are running programs, trying to achieve some better performance, unlock productivity, reduce costs, partnering with some of those organizations may help with some traction.
Could be a lead into.
Yeah, could be a lead into. Exactly. And then that could be the same channel that you get the information out.
So that's, while we've been talking about this, that actually leans into something I've been thinking about, or just like since Dan wrote, the Node.js follow-up points. What if this was a foundation provided service? Not necessarily foundation provided, but basically it was a way for the foundation to engage with enterprises at a higher level and help connect them to the people who can actually do this effectively. Would that make sense, or does that sound attractive? Like, would that be
I think there's going to be someone at the organizations you're trying to get to, as well as organizations working with those organizations directly as consultants or in whatever capacity they are, getting those people together, kind of like we are doing right now, would be definitely a good way to do this in some sort of official capacity for sure.
Yeah, I can tell you on the TELUS side, and I want to ask Joel as well, given the e-commerce context he's in, we've actually done a deep dive on performance in particular, and are measuring impact of seconds to millions of dollars in terms of business and other business loss or business revenue. And we've actually done that and quantified that internally. We've used things like, Google recently published a couple of case studies about performance numbers and impact on costs, and we've compared that to our internal kind of, customer acquisition cost and cost and revenue costs and all those kind of things. And the way we're looking at it, and specifically, just to be clear, from like web performance perspective, in terms of, every second cost us X amount of dollars or Y amount of dollars. But the same can be said for our infrastructure and our operational performance needs, just to look at it from, if I upgrade a version of Node and I get 10% performance improvement or even 5% performance improvements, that's going to mean millions of dollars to me. But I have no capacity as a business to go and do that on my own if I don't have that driver internally to force me to do it. And to your point, Tierney, if the foundation provides at least the inception point of that or the guiding hand to that, then it's all about framing it in the business context, given what the business is about. And so in my case, it's telecom transaction engagements and a little bit of e-commerce. In Joel's case, I guess it's more about the e-commerce part. I don't know, Joel, do you have any context to that?
Yeah. So for e-commerce, for us, it's less about individual performance. It's more about like how many cores do we have to run to allocate to run this app in order to serve
resource need, right?
Yeah. So, and as far as performance goes, we do look at them, and we do try to see how much improvement for every major node version we get. But to your question, we don't actually track them. So that is a good point. We probably should kind of like keep this history record. But so far, every major node version, we see a huge, at least double-digit improvement in terms of performance, especially from version 6 to version 8. And we look at the memory usage and CPU usage, and we do. So far, I think for us is that we look at the more important thing for us is that is there any errors like you mentioned, and we do track that, but we don't keep a history record of it. And every time we try a new node version, performance and then what kind of errors that would come up are the two key criteria we look for.
So I've been focusing a lot on performance and those kind of topics, but I think equally, and again, just piggybacking of the idea that Tierney is talking about, equally there's a level of, are you using Node the right way? And in the context that Joel said initially, like training and onboarding developers who may not have been familiar with it before, inevitably you're going to end up with, let's call it what it is, subpar code quality, and perhaps not using some of the core APIs effectively or efficiently. Especially with new metaphors around things like promises, and people are not familiar with that, or the callbacks and synchronicity of operations that not everybody's familiar with. So like and this is perhaps a little bit more detailed of a topic, but if the foundation perhaps provides those advisory or connection points of folks who can help your teams write better code, given the context of Node.js in particular, it's not just about how to make a RESTful API RESTful. It's more about how you're using the Node code itself and the APIs themselves in Node effectively, so that you're not hurting performance, you're not creating technical debt, you're not actually creating, and like Adrian said, package management is a big issue for them, and consistency of deployment and release management is an issue for them. If there's some sort of advisory around that, or some sort of a trusted source, let's say, to help organizations learn better, perhaps. I don't know if that's a topic that relates to Joel's and Adrian's work.
It's a good feedback point. It's a good thing for us to potentially carry back as a recommendation from this group that an action takes place. So I'd be remiss if I didn't poke everyone a little bit with a stick. Adrian, Joel, and Ahmed, all three of you are not members of the Node.js Foundation. And so one of the best ways to ensure that services are delivered on behalf of the end user community is to also encourage that your organizations do join the foundation. There are some relatively easy onboarding points. You don't have to go in all into the top tier commitment to be a valuable contributor there. Ahmed, to bootstrap what you're proposing, rather than setting our sort of waymarker as if the foundation has this thing, then we'll start it. What we might want to do with this enterprise focus group is in these sessions, set ourselves a deadline of we're going to collect some data together, right? Maybe for the next session, we could do a little bit of homework and collect some data, put some stuff in the pipeline, get some actual sort of under usage trials of what the data looks like, of how labor intensive it is or isn't to put in to our CI/CD pipelines, and then it's that initial concrete version of a thing that is often the spark that really gets the ball rolling. So rather than talking about the potential future, I think we have an opportunity with this group to really begin some action that we can snowball upon and make recommendations. For example, this group, the user feedback group, just helped land with the tooling focus team, make.p and some other user convenience functions that were constantly being leveraged from npm, and those are landing in FS. So folks are listening, and I think this is a fantastic way to have a big impact.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Those are very good points. And on the foundation thing, I should join personally myself, and I've been talking to our leaders on having the Walmart join the foundation, but it always comes back to that question of value add.
Right.
And I actually have another meeting at 10. I have to go, but I want to say something really quick about the training thing. So in the first year, one of the biggest things that I struggle with is to make our developer understand that uncaught exception is like crashing in Java. Our developer were trying to deploy apps to production with the console like constantly spitting out uncaught exception like 1 per second. And I'm like, guys, you have to understand this node may not crash when there's uncaught exception, but it's kind of like like null pointer exception in Java. Your app crash. You have to do something about these errors. So that's one of the biggest struggles I always had in the beginning, even now sometimes. Yeah, so I have to drop off. Sorry, guys. Yeah, thank you. It's nice talking to you guys.
Thanks, Joel.
Okay. All right, bye.
We are running up on time, but that was a good point about, the uncaught exception is a good example of where the documentation versus guides kind of balance lands, or references versus the guides at least. So I think we have a couple of good takeaways. I think if we follow up with some potential homework of what data can we collect and what information can we come back with. It doesn't have to be systematic today, but I, for myself, I'm going to take away just coming back with some insights about the penetration of Node.js in our organization, the number of what versions are we running, and how long have they been running. I don't know if I can get performance numbers historically, but maybe something we can look at it. And specifically, like I was going to mention this, but we're running low on time. We've built something internally where we go through every single GitHub repo in our org and look at every single dependency that we have in our organization, that we know what we're actually relying on the most to run our business. And spoiler alert.
Very smart.
It's going to be Express. Yes. As a off the topic example, but there's things that I don't even know, right? So having created that kind of library scanner just to understand what's out there and what developers are doing has actually opened up our eyes to a lot of things. And most importantly, to the versions that people are using, because not everybody's on the latest version, which means security vulnerabilities and other issues do come up. But that's something I was going to plan to open source and trying to make it anonymous in a way so that you can run it in your own organization and then for yourself have that visibility. But then maybe that's something we can publish and share back within this group and say, look, this is what our businesses run on. This is what hundreds of millions of dollars are relying on, right? So there's an aspect to that we can look at and see what we can do with it.
Awesome. So one other thing that before you close this out, Ahmed, one other thing that we could potentially from the community committee of Node.js bring back to this enterprise user feedback focus group. There's been a lot of effort put into revising and updating the documentation. That's still a work in progress, but one of the potential, since the docs and the context of getting sort of the enterprise team off the ground is so important in this context. One of the things that could be really valuable is providing some of that early feedback. So we could invite a documentation and website redesign team member to this session to share some of the work that's going on there and provide feedback to how this is or isn't valuable to enterprise needs.
I'm sitting right here, Dan. I've been thinking about that specific thing the whole time. Actually, a lot of what you're saying is very spot on with our plans for the website redesign work. We're expanding out to guides beyond docs, and have a kind of an RFC, I guess, out for people to come and help us build out a bunch of guides. we're looking for 2 or 3 people to begin that process, just to kind of get a few solid guides out of the way, and kind of pound a path down for people to follow. So, uncut exceptions is a really good one that we should have. So if anyone here is willing or has an employee who is willing, please, we'd love to talk to you about that. I'm happy to connect you, or you can just hop into the website repo.
I would also add one more homework topic for our next session, whatever that would be, is do reach out to your peers who are also in big organizations and are depending on Node.js, and let them know that we are having this dialogue, because they might also be interested in some form of contribution and or helping the feedback cycle that we mentioned.
I think in order to do that, so Ahmed, first, good job in leading this meeting. So first, try to open an issue in user feedback. So that will be great, because from there we can take it and we can show to the other people. And at least, like for example, for Intel, and the topics are great, but the people, they need to know. Right. Usually they are looking on YouTube and sometimes on the MD files on the notes, and that's it.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out. We should keep opening up issues. We've opened up a few issues about.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and also have in mind probably the next meeting, because hey, you did a good job today. I'm sorry, Dan, you're second today.
No, I'm happy to be second.
Yeah, I know you. I know you are.
I didn't talk for most of the meeting. I consider that a roaring success.
All right. Well, I think we're coming up on time, and everybody's probably got their schedules. I know I do. But yeah, thank you everybody for attending this first conversation. I think it's been very eye-opening, and we have some good thinking to do and some potential next steps to follow up on.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks everybody. Let's stop the live stream.